Hello everyone, my name is Angelica Chukwon and welcome to this intergalactic Learn with the Nerds session on data-driven decision making with Power BI. In this session, we are going to take a look at bringing in some project management data and building out a report from start to finish. Although this session will cover the Power BI report development lifecycle from data discovery to report design and the build out, the majority of this session is really going to focus on creating an interactive and engaging report. So we will connect our data, we will take a look at shaping it in the Power Query editor, we'll take a brief look at modeling and talk about a couple of important things around that, and then we'll get into that report build out. So let's go ahead and begin. So here we have our starting file. Now, report design can be a time-consuming process. So something that can help you and your colleagues in your organization save time is to either use a report template that is preloaded with a report theme. You can see here I have one preloaded for us now, as well as maybe some sample pages that do have a background that is added. Now, we won't go through the process of how I created this background, but know that you can do this in PowerPoint or Canva, and we have a couple of videos on our YouTube channel to also help you walk through those steps. But as you can see, this is a great jumping off point for us to get started with the things that we have preloaded. Let's begin by connecting our data. From the Home tab here, in this data grouping, you can see we have a few different data source connector options. The main data source connector option is right here on the left, this Get Data button. It's a two-part button with a drop-down showing you some common data sources, as well as the full list of data source connectors that can be accessed by clicking the top part of this button. Now, the data that we are connecting into is in an Excel workbook. So I can select this Excel workbook connector from right here or from my ribbon. I'll go ahead and select it here now since I have this Get Data window open, and then connect. Now, it will prompt you to navigate to the location on your machine if you are using an Excel file where that is stored. Now, you can see here that mine's dropping into this folder that I have, and I have this Learn with the Nerds data set here that I'm going to leverage and open up. So I'm going to go ahead and click open now, and we'll talk through the next steps here on the screen. The first thing you'll see once you have selected your workbook, you will find the Navigator window. Now here in the Navigator window, you have a couple of things here. You have your tables listed out as well as your worksheets. Now we can use the tables or the worksheets. They are really exactly the same, but the difference in leveraging those Excel tables is that you can see that they have this blue header at the top. That's how you know these are the Excel tables. And when we get into the Power Query editor, our headers will already be promoted and we won't have to rely on that automatic step. Now you have load and transform here. Load would be the option we would select if we want to immediately load the data into the Power BI desktop, or transform data is what we can select here to launch our Power Query editor. Let's select transform data now. Now the Power Query editor will launch in a separate window here. And once it does, I'm going to go ahead and drag it on over here now so we can talk briefly about that Power Query experience. So over here on the left-hand side, we have our queries pane. Here you will see that we can click into our different queries from our employees table, our location, project tasks, and projects. On the right-hand side, we have our query settings. This is where you're going to see any of the automatic steps that have been applied, those transformation steps. And we can click through these to see how our query has evolved and changed. Now, when you click a step, I want you to take a look at the formula bar and notice that in the formula bar, there is a coding language. That's the mashup language, also known as the mQuery or M code of the Power Query editor. Now, this is what's being run in the background that allows your queries to take shape, that allows you to add new columns and things like that. Now, although the Power Query editor does have that language, you could learn that mQuery language and write it manually yourself. However, you can leverage these buttons here in the UI to do most of the transformations that you will need. Now, as a best practice, it's a good idea for us to go ahead and rename our queries. So I'm going to go ahead here and get rid of these extra numbers on the employee table, my location table, and then I'm going to add a space here between project and tasks on the project task table. All right, so that was our first step in a best practice. Now, this is going to be a brief data shaping and data transformation section here that we are going to focus on. So I'm going to show you a couple of things that you can do in here, but know there's a lot of different transformations. You can add and remove columns in various ways. You can combine queries by merging them together by joining them on like columns. You can add rows from one table to rows of another and append them. So there's lots of different transformation options that we have. Now, as I take a look at my project management data here, I can see I have an employee table with lots of employee attributes and descriptors about our employees. Location's a bit smaller of a dimension table, but we can see here we do have various locations and headquarters that we can explore. We also have project tasks here. Project tasks is going to be one of our main tables, and it's going to serve as a form of a fact table for us. We'll talk more about that in a little bit, but you can see that there are various projects, and for each project there are various tasks, multiple tasks. Then we have a project table here as well. Now on my project table, I can see I have project name, project ID, department, and start date. What I don't have that would be really beneficial is an end date. Now I left this out on purpose so I could showcase how to create a new column using that mashup mQuery language in Power Query Editor. So let's go ahead and add that end date column. Now, one way that we can do this is we can go to the ribbon and select Add Column. And you'll see that we have various adding column options here. But the one that I want to leverage is the Custom Column option. Now, the Custom Column window is going to open up a new window here where we can go in and name our column. And I'll name it similar to the start date. I'm going to call it End Date here, no spaces. And now we can leverage that mQuery code. So I'm going to start by typing out the function I want to use to add a new column. I'm going to use the date.addMonths function. Now, the reason I'm using date.addMonths is because I know that within our project management company, we have an internal policy where our project should be completed within a 6 months time frame. So, and that's true for all of these here, hypothetically speaking, of course. So we'll go ahead here and create that new column. So I'm going to say that for our end date column, we are going to leverage that date.addMonths function. Now, date.addMonths is going to require us to pass through two things. First, we have to pass through a date for this to reference. I'm going to leverage the start date function. So I'm going to type a square bracket and I'm going to pull in that start date column. Now I could have also selected from this list here, but I'm typing here in that formula window, so I'll just keep going. Comma, now we shift over to add the number of months we want to add as a number. So I'm going to go ahead here and say 6, 6, closing parentheses, and there we go. You always want to make sure that you have no syntax errors detected, and so we can see this is good to go. Let's go ahead and click OK and see what we get in our query. We have our end date column here now, which is great. But one thing I need to do is update the data type. And there's a couple of ways you can do this, and I'll show you an alternative method to changing data types here in just a moment as well. But from the drop down here, I want to click that ABC123, which is really that kind of that any data type that we want to avoid if possible. So I'm going to change it from ABC123 to that date data type so that it is formatted just like our start date is as well. Now, our data set has a few date columns. We can see those on projects. I can see that there's one here on project tasks. We have our approval date. I have an employee date attribute here, their hire date. So we have lots of different date columns, and we could do nothing else here in Power Query Editor and leverage the automatic date hierarchy feature in Power BI. And if we enable that in our options and settings, this would allow us to leverage those date hierarchies where we would see columns that were created automatically like year, quarter, month, month number, now, and date. Now, this is great. But using that automatic date time feature does come with its problems. It restricts us when it comes to using DAX for date and time calculations. The better way to handle date data is to really consider and to add a separate date table. A separate date table is really essential for every Power BI data model because it enables efficient time-based analytical calculations. It gives you the flexibility. Now, there's a few different ways that we can go about adding this date table, but I want to show you how we can add a new query and we can take a sample script that we have found out there and add it in. You could also do this another way. Let's say you have a script and query script from another Power BI file you want to bring in here. You can go this route as well. So let me show you how we can take a script from one query to another, copying it and placing it in the advanced editor of this new one here. So we are going to go ahead here now and add our blank query. Now there's a couple of ways to add a new blank query. We can click new source, blank query, and add it there. Or I love this method. We can right click the queries pane, hover over new query, and see that we have different data source options here. We'll go ahead and select blank query. Now here's where we are going to go out and grab our sample scripts. Now I have a browser window open and I have a blog post here from Devin Knight that has a date dimension script. Now this was originally written with Excel in mind and adding this into a Excel query in the Power Query Editor. But Power Query in Excel and Power Query in Power BI are almost identical. So we're actually going to copy this whole script here and we are going to insert this in the advanced editor of our Power Query query. Now, we do have a video that walks you through this step by step in more detail on our YouTube channel as well, so definitely check that out if you are interested. Back here on our Power Query Editor window in Query 1, I want to go in and I want to select the advanced editor. So there are two places you can see your M code, the formula bar and the advanced editor. Now the advanced editor would show us the full M query script, but this is a new query we're starting with from scratch, so there's nothing in here. We're actually going to select all and replace all of this text with the query script that we copied over. So once you have that pasted in, then we can go ahead and click done. Now, here's where the fun starts. You can see here we have some parameters to work with, and we can invoke here this function that has been created, this function query. So I'm going to input a start date of January 1st, 2010. And that's because I know our data set has dates that go back to 2010. And I want to start from the earliest day of the earliest year to make sure that I account for all of those dates. And then I could analyze things like my employee hire date, as well as the date that a project task was approved. Now for the end date, you want to go to the last day of the last year of available data. Or you can give yourself a little bit of a buffer and add additional years. So I'm going to go ahead and say that our calendar table, our date table should go through the year 2030. And if we ever need to modify this, we can come back in and modify that as so. Let's go ahead and click invoke and take a look at what we get. So you can see here, based on the query script that we added in, we now have 7 new columns here. The date, the year, the quarter, the week number, the month, and the day of week. All based on that query script that we inserted and the start and end dates that we entered into our parameters on that previous custom function query. So we need to change the data types here now, as well as rename our date table before we load this in. So let's rename our date table here from invoke function to date. We'll keep it simple. And now I want to show you a different way to update your data types. I'm going to select all of these columns here. And now from the ribbon, I can select in the transform tab, the detect data type. This is one of my favorite ways to quickly update your data types, because as you select this, notice it's going to update. You always want to validate those data types though, but as I look at this here, it looks great. That is what I want, and that's perfect. All right, now that we have all of our queries here that we are looking for, and we have our data type set, we want to go ahead and take this back into the Power BI desktop. And so to do that here, I'm going to select this close and apply button. Now, as I select this, I'm going to talk through what this does. So in Power Query, only a sample of your data for each query is loaded, no more than 1,000 rows per query. The transformations we applied would only be applied to those rows until we hit close and apply, which triggers the process of these transformations being applied to all rows of data and loading our tables into the Power BI desktop. Here now we can see our tables are listed alphabetically over here on the right-hand side in our data pane, and the columns are listed alphabetically as well. Let's head over to our model view now before we begin building out our report. So Power BI has automatic relationship detection, and it will automatically try to detect those relationships. Now, it sets the relationship properties for the cardinality as well as the cross-filter direction. That is the way that the filter is going to propagate when you are pulling these columns into your visualizations. Now, Power BI examines the column names in the query tables and does its best to detect potential relationships and create them if there is a high confidence match found. If it is not found, then no relationships will be created. And you can see that's what's happened here for our date table and our location tables. So we will go ahead and manually create those here now. So let's take a look at doing that. Our date table, I want to link back to our project task since that's one of the main things that we are tracking here. So from the date table, I'm going to grab the date column and I'm going to drag and drop it on top of the approval date, which is what I'm most interested in seeing here. So I'm going to drag and drop that onto this particular column. Notice you have this relationship editor window that appears and lets you confirm the columns you are applying this relationship on. You could modify that here if you need to, but notice it is set to that one-to-many relationship type. Now, we'll talk more about the type of model that is taking place and kind of taking shape here in just a moment, but know that the ideal relationship between a fact table and a dimension table is going to be this one that you see here. Depending upon which table is referred to first, the date table, which is a dimension, or our fact table, which is project task, will depend on whether this is referred to as a one-to-many or many-to-one. Know that they are essentially the same relationship, though. It just depends on what table is listed first as your primary table. We'll click Save here now. Now, the second relationship we are going to create is going to be between our location and our employee table. Because on my employee table, I have the reporting location as well as location name over here on the location table. So let's drag and drop location name to reporting location, confirm it's creating it on the right columns, and then we'll click Save. So let's go ahead here now and head back to our report view. Now, here is where we are going to start building out a report. But before we do, let's briefly talk about how Copilot can be used to help you in Power BI. Now, some of you may not be able to follow along with this piece, but that's okay. This will be a short piece. It will be more of a quick sneak peek, a quick sneak preview into what Copilot can do for you. In order to use Copilot, you do need to have the proper licensing, and your organization's tenant admin does need to have Copilot enabled for the tenant. I'm going to click this Copilot button, and in just a moment, we will see that we need to make sure that we have selected that Copilot workspace. I do have to be a part of that. I can click OK, and then we should see that Copilot pane preview here. I'm going to go ahead and click Get Started. Now, there's a lot of different ways we can use Copilot in Power BI, but I want to briefly showcase one way. One way is to use this Create New Report Page suggestion. So I'm going to select this here. And let's give it a moment here to see what it produces. And it's going to give us some options. So let's take a look at how quickly it produced those. I can see here it's retrieved a couple of different options for us based on our semantic model. That is the only thing it's based off of. You can see it's given us some employee overview. So a suggested page here is looking at the employee demographics, tracking things like employee hire date. Project task management here, monitoring the status and priority of project tasks. Location analysis, that's a good one too. Project performance and approval workflow. So I could take any one of these suggestions here now, and I can ask Copilot to build one of these out for us, and it will reproduce here. Produce for us a report page with multiple visualizations and things that we can use either to push out and publish to our users, or we can tweak it and use that as a jumping off point as well. So while the suggestions and what is produced may not perfectly align with your report request or requirements, you can see how it can help you steer in the right direction, giving you the ideas to break through a roadblock. You can also tell it to create that report page fully for you, which is really cool, but we're going to do that ourselves now. So I think I'll take some of these suggestions here, and I'm going to close the Copilot preview pane. And let's build out our first page, which is going to serve as our project overview page. So similar to that project management suggestion, we will build out that project overview page. So I'm going to go ahead and rename page 1 here now to my project overview. Now, When you are designing a report, it's a good idea to group like tasks together to speed up your build process. So let's go ahead here and begin. Now I have a couple of things here in the background of this page, which are essentially where I want to place the visualizations. I've already planned out this report, so I have an idea of what I want it to look like here, and that's what I can start with. And building out that wireframe makes it really easy for you to see exactly where you're going to place things, and this won't be visible once we put our visuals in. So let's go ahead and let's start with what I want to see here at the top, which is going to be a logo, which I'll tell you how we're going to use that in a second, and our text box. So I'm going to go to my insert tab. I'm going to go over to image, and right inside of my files here, I'm going to pull in this Pragmatic Works logo. Now, as soon as I click open, it will bring that in, and I need to go ahead and resize it here to about the size that I want it to be. I think that looks good. Perfect. Now, once we have this added in, I could leave this and it could just be an image that is there for aesthetics. But we have an option here to link this to an action. So with this selected, I'm going to go to the Format Image pane and enable the action and expand this. Notice here that in the action, we have a few different options. We can change this from back to a bookmark. We can change it to page navigation, Q&A, or I can set it to web URL. So I think it would be really neat if I had this linked to our Pragmatic Works homepage. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go out to the web and I'm going to bring that URL in. And here we go. Now it should automatically link. You can test out any of your images or buttons actions by holding control and then clicking that. And there we go. It opens right up, which is beautiful. Now I'm going to copy this over to my main page in just a second. But first, let's go ahead and add a text box here as well. So from my insert tab also, I'm going to select that text box here now. And with my text box, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drag this up to be about even with the visual border there. And I'm going to type in here project overview, the same thing that we have listed down there to the page on the bottom. Now text boxes are a little clunky, so we're going to work and format this one and then we'll copy and paste it over to save ourselves a headache and some time. So I'm going to select all my text. I'm going to bold this. I'm going to center this. Let's change the font size to about 24. I think that's good. Let's try that. And the font color here. Now notice that the colors that are appearing here are various shades of blue. This is tied back to the theme that I have loaded in, which is great because it makes it really easy for me to find similar colors that I can use from page to page. All right, let's go ahead here now and expand this so that our project overview title text box is all on one line. Now, the last thing I'd like to do is I'd like to turn off the background of this. So I'm going to select the text box. I'm going to go over to the general section, expand effects, and turn off the background. All right, so now that we have these added, let's go ahead and start copying and pasting these items over to our next pages. We'll start with our image here. I'm going to select this and do a Control-C. I'll go over to page 2 and then I'm going to paste this in. I'll also paste this on our future drill through page so that that is there as well. Let's go back to the project overview page. Let's snag that text box. I'm going to make sure I've selected the whole thing. And I'm going to go ahead and paste that here on page 2 in my drill through page. We'll go ahead and rename those once we start building out those pages there and rename those. All right, let's go ahead and go back to the project overview page and start adding our visuals here. So the first thing that I'd like to have here is a bar chart. And this bar chart is going to show things like the project as well as the task and the number of tasks. And I'd like to see those sorted by priority so I can see how many projects and tasks are in high priority versus medium and low. And then we can have additional conversations there. So I'm going to go over to my visualizations pane. I'm going to grab that stacked bar chart. And I'm going to drag it over here. I'm going to resize it just generally. We'll give it a good size here adjustment in just a moment. Let's populate it with some data. So from my data pane, I'm going to go into the projects. And I'm going to go ahead and pull over project name. So I'm going to bring project name into the Y. Then I think I'll also grab from my project task that task ID and drop that in the X. Now there's one more thing I want to grab here, and that's going to be the priority from the project task. I'm dropping it in the legend. Now I want to go ahead and give this a little bit of formatting. Now, let's go ahead here and apply some of those formatting options. With your visualization selected, you should see on your visualizations pane, there are 3 buttons. The build button, which allows you to add data to your visuals, the format your visual, and the analytics pane. If we go to format your visual, here we can go into the different settings here, and I think we'll go ahead and modify a couple of things. First, let's go ahead and turn off the titles on the X and the Y axes. So I'll do that on the Y, and then we'll go ahead and do that on the X. Now that we have modified that, let's go ahead and add some additional effects to our visual. I'm going to go into general. I'm going to go over to effects. Now, effects is where you're going to find different things like your background, your border, shadow, things like that. So we'll go ahead and leave the background alone, but let's go ahead and make sure our border is on, and we'll actually change the border to white, and we'll go ahead and round the corners here to about 10 pixels, and we'll also up the width here, which, as you notice, if we update the width, it gives this a little bit of, a slight increase, almost like padding around the edges. So you can see that slight border that has been added there now. Let's also go over and add a shadow. Now, the shadow default color is that true black, but I like to modify it to one of these kind of the white or gray shades that have been modified. So let's go ahead here. I'll try this one. That's not bad. I think that's a good one here. So let's go with that particular shade. It is on the outside and the bottom right. So although it still gives us a shadow, it's not as dramatic and it's a bit more subtle. All right, we're going to modify these all together, some of these other settings. And so let's go ahead and move on now to our map visual. So on the map visual, I'm going to go ahead and add that map visual in. But before I do, I'm going to make sure I click away from that previous bar chart. So let's add in the map visual. So here on my map visual section, let's go ahead and I want to take a look at a couple of different things here. I'm going to bring in from my location the state and province, and that's going to add into the location field. And you can see we have just a couple of locations here, those headquarters. Now, it is a little difficult to see those at the moment and to tell what they are. We can hover and see that default text box appear. But let's also go ahead here and bring into the bubble size the project ID. So I'm going to bring bubble size into project ID, and let's go ahead and modify this visual a little bit more. I'm going to expand this here, and I'm going to change and add category labels. So now we can clearly see exactly where those headquarters are located. Let's go ahead here now and take a look at bringing in one more visual here, our column chart. So I'm going to bring over my column chart again, clicking away, making sure your map's not selected. And I'm going to add that column chart down here to the bottom. And on this column chart, I really just want to be able to view the number of hours across the months to view those projects and how many hours are being spent. So from the dates table, I want to go ahead and grab the month, and that should be on our x-axis. And then from project tasks, I'm going to bring in number of hours. Now, when you first add this in here, you're going to notice a couple of things. One, it's not sorted correctly. So we need to change the sorting in 2 places. We need to change the sorting on the visual by selecting the ellipses and hovering over sort axis and moving it from sorting by number of hours in descending order to sorting by the month and sorting in ascending order, which is better. Now, we still need to tell Power BI that this month column should be sorted actually by the month number and not by the month name itself, and that's why it's sorting these months alphabetically. The way that we do that, I'm going to click away from the visual so it's clear to see, is we need to go to that column, the month column, and we need to highlight that column so that it opens up this column tools tab in the ribbon. So I'm going to click on top of the name of the column, and in column tools, you'll see sort by column. We can change from the month, which is what it's currently sorting on, which is alphabetically, to month number, and now you will see those sorted perfectly. The other thing you'll notice here is that we have some blanks appearing. Now, these blanks that are appearing here are actually within our data. But you always want to double check because sometimes blanks can be a sign that there are issues in the data, like possibly mismatched data types or an issue with the joins and relationships that are trying to look at these particular columns that are relating. So let's go ahead to our table view. If we look at our project task specifically, and I go to approval date, you'll see there are some blanks. And really what that is caused by, those are particular projects that were aborted. So there is no approval date. I'll clear the filter here, and back on the report view, we can select this visual, go to our filters pane, and we can say, hey, when the month is blank, just filter that out. So now it won't show those there. Another thing that I would like to do to take care of, and I want to rename our titles, and I also want to modify our legend here. So if I click the visual, this bar chart here, I want to center my title and center the legend. Let's start with the legend. So I'm going to select the format pane, select my legend section, and I'm going to position that legend top center. There's something else you may notice that's a little funky about our legend. We have this set and it's showing as high, low, medium. So this is not a good order for this to appear, but we can leverage another column like we did on the month to sort this. So the way that we will do that is we need to go find that priority column from project tasks. I'm going to select the text of it to open this up in my column tools, and under sort by column, I'm going to change this from sorting on itself to this priority order column that I have, which basically says if the column, if low is the priority, that sort order will be 1. If medium is the priority, sort order will be 2, and high is 3. And anything else, I put 0 just in case there are any blanks. There we go. Now that's sorting perfectly. Let's head over to our title, and we're going to modify the titles of all our visuals at the same time. So for the bar chart here, I'm going to change this to be the project tasks by priority. I'm going to center that here as well, and we'll keep that as is. Now let's go ahead here, and before we move on to the next visual, let's modify the properties, the size of the visual. So I would like to modify the size of this so that it fills out that space, and then we'll apply that formatting elsewhere. So I'm going to change this to, let's see, we'll do 288 for our height and 515 for the width. Now I did play around with that a little bit beforehand to make sure that I had that where I wanted it. But let's go ahead here now, and I'm going to move this on over to cover that kind of space there. So you just kind of got to drag it on over. Now the next thing that I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and select my format painter so that I can steal the settings, all of the tweaks that I've made here, like the shadow, the border, the rounded edges, and I'm going to apply that to the map visual. And then we can also repeat those steps, and I can apply this to my column chart here. If I want to make sure I get things like those x-axis and y-axis titles turned off, I can steal that from the bar chart, so I can copy those settings over. All right. Let's go ahead and change those titles here now for our map visual. So in that general section, I want my title to be the project distribution by headquarters. And the column chart down here should be our project hours by month. All right, the final thing that I want to go ahead and add here on this page is the new card visual. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the new card visual from my visualizations pane. And the new card visual allows me to go in and format this as one whole object at once. So I'm going to go ahead here and grab a couple of things. Now from my project task table, I'm going to grab project ID, task ID, and then let's also grab number of hours. Now notice how it populated this. Project ID is down in categories. I'm going to drag this up to the data section here on my visualizations pane. And it's also showing me the first of these. I'm going to change that so that project ID is set to account, task ID is also set to account, and number of hours. Now I want to make sure that I can see this. So instead of looking at this as a single row, I want to look at this as a single column. So I'm going to go to the Format Your Visual section. Underneath of the layout, I'm going to change this from single row to single column. Here in the single column section here, now I can fully see each one of these cards. Now, something that I want to go ahead and modify here is as I'm looking at this, I can see that I'm getting a count of the projects and count of tasks, and they are the same value. So let's go ahead here and actually change that on the build section from a count on project to distinct count. Now I can see I have that particular counts there. We can rename the cards here by renaming the items on the visualization pane that we've added. So I'll change the count of project ID to total projects. I will go ahead and change the count of task ID to total tasks. And I will change my hours to total project hours. Now these will update as we make selections. And we'll see how the cross filtering is going to change those values as they are dynamic. Let's go ahead and add a little bit of formatting to this to make it look similar to our report and to give it a little bit more of a little zhuzh. We'll zhuzh it up. So here on the new card visual, I'm going to go to my visualizations pane and I want to modify the formatting. So again, we changed the layout to single column here. I'm going to go ahead and also change let's go into our callout values section. Now in callout values, I'm going to make sure that the font size for all of these is 25. And let's also change the theme color here to, we'll do theme color 160% lighter. Now we'll change the label as well. I'll go ahead and go down here and let's change the label to, we'll keep the font size as 12. We'll change the color to white and we'll leave it above value. So we'll go ahead here now and change the background as well so you can see that here in just a second. So let's go ahead and minimize some of this here and we'll go ahead and head down to our cards. In the card section, I'm going to change the shape from rectangle to rounded rectangle. And then we'll round those corners to about 10. Give it some slight rounding to kind of match the rest of this here. Now, the next thing that I want to do is I want to go ahead and go into the background section. We'll change the background here to this final color. And I like that. I like the way that it shows. But let's go ahead here and let's go into this background and turn off the background. Now, these measures that we have here on these cards are implicit measures. And these are metrics that are created by Power BI on any column that is numeric or where a count or distinct count can be set. Now, a better practice would be to create explicit measures, which will be covered in the following session on DAX, led by Mitchell Pearson. The final thing I'd like to do is add a couple of slicers to this page here now. And so I'm going to go ahead and start by grabbing that slicer from my visualizations pane. I'll drag it over. I'm going to resize it a little bit and we'll modify this a bit more in just a moment. But let's go ahead and bring in from our date table, the date, because I would like to slice this by the date fields. Now let's go ahead and go into the formatting pane here and let's go ahead and modify a few things. So there is a slider that is hard to see right now because I resized it, but I'm going to go ahead and toggle that off because this will still work as a date picker and I like that look and feel just a little bit better. Let's go ahead here. While we are here now, let's modify a couple more things. We'll leave it set as the slicer setting between. Let's go into general. Let's toggle off the background. And then let's go ahead and check on the size of this here. Let's kind of modify it to, I think the height needs to be a little bit smaller to fit into that section, that header at the top. So we'll go with 60 here. And let's try 220. Okay, we'll go with 220. I like to go between those two for our slicer visuals. So I'm going to pull this up here and I'm going to drop it right there. Now I'm going to add two more slicers. And so for this, I'm going to go ahead and copy paste this so I can leverage a lot of the settings I've already added. And then I can just tweak it a little bit. And I'm going to replace the date here now in the build section with the department from my employees table. And I'm going to change this from that slicer that is currently a vertical list to the drop down. So now it is set as a drop down. I'm going to copy and paste this on over and I'm going to go ahead and change, whoops, let's resize that. I'm going to go ahead and change that from department to location. So here I'm going to change this field from the department to location from there. And I'll go ahead and change it from location name to just location, keep it simple. And then one thing you can do is you can multi-select your slicers go to the format section in your ribbon. You can select align at top, and you can also click to distribute them horizontally so they're evenly distributed. All right, so I think this is great here. Let's go ahead and move on to our next page. So our next page here, page 2, is going to be our project page, or excuse me, our task project by headquarters. So this is going to be our task project by headquarters. And here on the task project by headquarters page, we are going to go ahead and rename the text here as well. So this will be our task project by headquarters. Now the other thing here we can do is we can resize this so it's all one line, and there we go, perfect. Now this page is going to serve one main purpose, and that is to show task project progress by project and headquarters. So when we are creating our reports on project management or measuring progress, a Gantt chart is an excellent choice for a visual. So let's go ahead and pull in that Gantt chart. Now the Gantt chart is shown down here, and this is a custom visual. It's not native to Power BI, but I have gone ahead and preloaded it here in our report. This custom visual is created by the Microsoft Corporation, so this is a really great one to use here as well. But you can find any custom visuals by clicking the ellipses in your visualization pane and then get more visuals. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this into the report as well. Our report here is really only going to contain 2 visuals, so we'll go ahead on this report page and get this set up. So I'm going to drag this in and resize and center it. And then let's go ahead and also add in our second visual, which will be a much simpler one, which is a slicer. So I'm going to click away from that Gantt chart. I'm going to add in my slicer visual. And then for this, let's go ahead and add from the location table, location name. So I'm actually going to change this to a tile slicer. And I'm also going to go in here and turn off the slicer header. I'll go ahead and change this so that it is now going to show as one single row here. So I'm going to go ahead and resize this to fit the space that I want. And then I'm going to go ahead here and center that. We can resize this so it does equal the same space as that Gantt chart visual, just so it keeps things consistent and lined up here. Let's go ahead and add our font color here now. And so inside of values, I'm going to change the font color to be that theme color 8 that we've been using. I think I'll go ahead and bold the font as well. And I'll bump it up here a little bit to, let's go with size 12. Now let's go ahead and change the background here. And I'm going to change the background color to, let's go with theme color 1, 60% lighter. Now finally, we'll toggle off the background here to give it a nice cohesive look. So our Gantt chart is going to contain a few different pieces, and these are great when you are comparing details about various projects. Our projects have various tasks, and each project has a start date and an end date, as well as an assigned employee. So once we add the Gantt chart to our page, we will start to add the fields. So let's go ahead now and bring over from our project table, we are going to bring in that project name, and I'm going to drop that into the parent section to be the start of our parent-child hierarchy. From our task table, I'm going to bring in task ID and drop that into task. And then from the project table as well, I'm going to go ahead and grab start date and drop that into the start date field and end date into the end date field. Now, when we first glance at this, you're going to see that it looks like it's kind of hard to really notice any sort of progress. We have to scroll a ton here. And that's because the interval that it's showing up here at the top of our Gantt chart is by the week. We can change this to month by going to our format settings here and changing the data type from week to month. So now we have a much better view, and it makes it easier to see the progress on those longer projects. If we go back to the build section, I can also go ahead here and now bring from the employee table the employee name, and I can add that down here in the resource section. What's really neat about this is we can move these to inside of these bars. This is really just a form of a bar chart, right? So in data labels, we can change the position from right to inside, and we can put this as full text to show the full name if we want there. So this is great because we can see who exactly was assigned this project. Now, a couple of other things we can do on the visualizations pane in this settings here, we can grab things like approved by and drop it into tooltips and approval comments. And then when we hover, we can see who was approved by and any comments that they added there. So we can get a little bit more details about that particular task. Now, one thing that I think it would be really nice to add here to our legend is the status from progress tasks. So I'm going to add this from project tasks into the legend. Now, the default colors that you can see here are using that theme, but we can go into the visualizations pane, go into the legend, and we can go in here and modify this a bit more. I like to use for things like this some traditional colors. So red for anything negative, like these aborted projects. Completed, we'll use a form of green, so we'll do a muted green there. And the in progress being left at that kind of muted blue is perfectly fine. Let's go over to the general section and go to title and modify the title of this. And so my title will now be tasks by project, which is great. And we can go ahead here and go to the visual section, go to our legend, and we can center this top center, and we can make sure that our title is also centered as well. All right, now let's go ahead and move over to our drill through page. So this drill through page here is going to serve as our task details page. And this is going to allow us to set up a page that will be hidden from our user's view, but allow us to create a more detailed view from this summary page, this project overview page. This is great because it helps us analyze additional information and gain deeper insights into a specific area of interest, a specific data point like the project, for example, without overcrowding all of the data and information on one page. So we'll go ahead here and rename this page here, our drill through page. I'm going to rename this to our task details. And I'm going to go ahead and also rename the text box, the title of our page, to task details 2. And then we're just going to add in a simple table here. Now I'm going to resize this table. I'm going to let it take up kind of the majority of this page, and we'll center it here as well. I'm going to bring it down some. All right, and let's go ahead and add in those fields. So from our project task table, let's go ahead and bring in the project. I'm going to also bring in the task ID from project tasks, and let's bring in that description. Let's bring in the priority. Let's bring in who it is assigned to and whether or not it is approved. Let's go ahead and modify the description here so that we can see all of our data without having to scroll, since the description is pretty long. So you can drag that edge of the description fields there over, and we'll do this until that scroll goes away. All right, we'll leave it there. Now let's go ahead and add some formatting. So from the format your visual button, I can go over here and I can choose to do a few things. I'm going to go into style presets, and I'm going to change this from bold header flashy, from default to bold header flashy rows. I can go into the column headers section, and I'm going to change my column header background to that purple that we like. I'm going to bold the text. I'm going to center it here as well, which looks good. I think we might need to resize the description and get a little bit more after we did that. Now I can go in and change these alternating background colors to, align more with my theme or to be a little bit more accessible. But let's go ahead and let's set this up as our drill through page. So to set this up as a drill through page, I need to add a field here that's going to be tied back to my project overview here. And so this project name column. So we have our project name here from the project table. So on the task detail page, I'm going to go over to my projects table. I'm going to grab project name and drop it in right here. Now, if I go to my project overview page, I can go to any one of these tasks. I can right click one, I can hover and drill through to task details, and it's going to filter down based on those details. The other thing I would want to do is, now that we have that icon, which is a part of that drill through, I can make sure that this is formatted the way that we want it, this back button. And so I can drag this icon over right above the table. I can go into the style section, and for the icon, I can change it so that it matches our theme here. All right, so the final thing that I want to show is a report page tooltip. And a report page tooltip is a report page that will act as a tooltip. So when we hover over our project hours by month, I can see a text box. But it'd be really nice if instead I could see a visualization here. So on this tooltip page, there are two things we need to do. First, we need to tell Power BI to treat this report page in the report page settings section here. Under page information, we need to allow it to be used as a tooltip. It will shrink that down. So it'll allow us to display customized information. We're just going to make a simple tooltip, and for this, from the visualizations pane, I'm going to grab a donut chart. I'm going to make it take up the full size of that tooltip. And from the project task table, I'm going to grab the status and add it to the legend and the values. Now, because it'll be clear, I think, with the status shown here in the legend, I'm going to turn off the title to give us a little bit more real estate on this visual. And then now we need to link it back to our project overview, specifically this project hours by month. So on this visual here, we have the month and the sum of our number of hours. So I need to link it back to that page. So in order to do this, I'm going to head over to our tooltip page, and I'm going to make sure that from this page here, I am linking that tooltip to this visual. So with my project hours by month column chart selected, I'm going to select that format icon, and I'm going to go to the general section, and in tooltips, I'm going to say that I want the tooltip to be a report page, but instead of auto, I'm going to set it to that tooltip. Now, when I go over the project hours by month visual, I can hover and see what % of particular projects are going to be completed and which ones possibly are still in progress. So it's really nice to be able to see that. So now that we've built out this great looking report, it's in a great state, but in its current state, this report lacks the analytical metrics that could really enhance our analytics and understanding of the business. Something that can really help that is DAX. DAX stands for the Data Analysis Expression Language, and the language of the Power BI desktop. So with DAX, you can create new tables and columns, but most of the time you will use DAX to create new measures. In our next section, Mitchell Pearson will take you on a journey on how to use DAX to enhance your model and analysis. If you are watching this live, stay tuned as we'll be starting this session shortly, but if you're watching it later on, be sure to check out our Enhancing Data Analysis with DAX session on our Intergalactic Learn with the Nerd playlist to learn more. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this session, and I'll see you next time.